think we're ready. Let's go. We'll go ahead and get started. Ray, roll tape. Number one is call to order. That was that. Number two is approved minutes of April 14th, 2011.
So move.
Any comments or anything? Second?
No, Linda's not here.
She'll do it from the tape, I guess.
She'll get it, yeah.
Okay.
Correction.
Then all in favor of approving the minutes of April 14th, 2011, say aye. Aye. It doesn't appear to be that there's anyone here who needs to go first, but I try to give people that opportunity if they need it.
Does Howard need to go? Howard Jones?
Is that him? He's not on the agenda.
Is it on the agenda?
That's not on the
It's not
agenda.
on the agenda unless we bring up the CR. Ms. Burrows, gas station.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and do that? Are you Mr. Johnston?
Yes.
Anybody have any objection to giving Mr. Johnson a couple minutes on the, Mr. Johnson owns the, I guess it was a BP? Owns the property that was a BP that we have stopped and started negotiations with. Mr. Johnston, you're not on the agenda, but I appreciate you coming down, taking your time. Give you a couple minutes to let us know what you want us to know. We're not going to take any action on it tonight, in part because it's not on the agenda, and in part because any action of this committee is advisory only.
I understand
But
that.
you do have almost everyone here. Let's see, maybe everybody. Everybody's here. Everybody's within earshot.
Okay.
You're up.
My biggest question is, and this is you and I have discussed, and I've discussed with some of the other aldermen, that has been ongoing for some time, and I just need to know what I need to do to try to find out what needs to be done to bring it to closure one way or the other. That's really
Okay.
my only question.
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but if, as I understand the process, we got to a contract price that the board declined.
Right.
If you have a price in mind that you want to propose, I would encourage you to bring it to administration. They will see to it that we get it, and we can act on it. There wouldn't be any reason to run it back through multiple stages. I mean,
The only thing that might be helpful that we're in the process of doing is updating the appraisal related to the project itself, because that needs to be updated so that we can, regardless of purchase of the full property, there's property involved in the Hillsborough Road project. We want to update that appraisal and also include an estimate related to damages. That's an information we did not have before.
inverse condemnation.
Yes,
damages.
that may be helpful to us understanding what we're going to have to pay probably regardless to do the project versus the full piece of property.
Mr. Johnson, do you know what inverse condemnation is?
Yes.
Okay. I don't mean to insult you by asking. I just don't want to waste your time if you know. All right. So we're currently in the process of getting additional information that we didn't have the first time around about what you're probably going to get paid no matter what we do.
Right.
And I'll just tell you that the closer it doesn't matter what we do, number comes to your number, the more sense it makes to go ahead and buy it from you and take care of business.
Okay.
I don't know where those numbers are, and we won't know our side of that equation for.
No, we're waiting on appraisals now, and
Can you give Mr. Johnson and all of us a timeline?
plus we also have to get the review appraisal,
Okay.
the one that we just
And you just authorized those
Tuesday night.
All right.
But they can't do that until we get their first
All
appraisal.
right. So do you understand that process, the appraisal and review?
So
I do.
Okay. So what, do we know the timeline on that? Because Mr. Johnston obviously has a legitimate interest in knowing.
we have asked for Mr. Johnson's property to be first, and Ben,
It'll be
I
at
don't know
least-
if he knows it's being here.
He's not in here right now.
Okay.
It's going to be at least a month for the appraisal process and.
But as soon as we have that, we
Review.
will be back in touch
Okay.
and
Who do I need to talk to about?
When you get if you can bring your number in anytime you want.
All right.
We're going to have to wait until we get our side of that equation in hand. But anytime you want to make an offer, whether it's on a napkin or something, a lawyer, you paid too much a lawyer to do, that's fine.
Okay.
So, but we'll be happy to, obviously a significant part of that property is going to be taken in straight up, right away. And the more that happens, obviously, the greater the potential for inverse condemnation damages. So
Okay.
the numbers may come together and it may be a no-brainer.
All right.
Okay.
That's fine. That's all I need to know, and I appreciate all of you giving me.
And
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Mr.
Thank you.
Johnston. Okay, number 3, consideration of change order number 1 with WL Haley and Company, Inc. for the Downs Boulevard 12-inch reclaimed water line and west reclaimed water line, ERA Division A, and the Downs Boulevard 24-inch water line, Division B projects of City of Franklin contract number 2009-0099 for a contract time extension of 24 calendar days with no increase in cost.
So
That's a
moved.
lot of reading to do.
So moved.
Is this a fait accompli anyway?
Do I?
Is it a fait accompli anyway? Have they already used their 24 days?
No, they have used a little bit of it, I think.
Okay.
Or have.
Well, I'm always glad that people come in and ask for the 24 days
they've
before they
used it?
use them.
No, this one has not been.
No,
Okay,
it hasn't
good.
even started.
I heard a motion. Was
I
there a
did, yeah.
second? All right, all in favor? Aye. Number 4, consideration of the road impact fee offset agreement, City of Franklin contract number 2011-0055 with Rural Plains Partnership, Chadwell Partnership, and Reams Fleming Partnership for the Lewisburg Pike improvements.
You have the memo and you have the agreement for you in your packets. The applicant is here, Mr. Brian Eccles. I think, I don't see Adam. But in discussions with him, they seem to be in agreement with what we have over this. And of course, it has to go to the board, so.
Well, so the staff calculations was 134,000 and change.
No, wrong one. No, that's the next item.
It's on the site. Yeah.
You've got two.
You've
The
got
memo-
two
the
things
memo
on
covers
one
both
memo.
of them.
The first part of the memo is for the road impact fee, and then.
Okay, so the road impact fee, we're all in agreement.
Well,
Or they've seen it, they've come to see it our way?
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
That was our conversation with Adam earlier today.
they agree with us. All
Right.
right, well, is there a motion then as to the road impact fee agreement?
So moved.
Is that the 3,000,000?
That's the total of $3,742,511, and it's done in 2 phases. And the recommendation to you is that the total be that, and then the phases are split up, and phase 2 would not be eligible until they start construction on phase 2.
All right, I heard a motion.
Second.
A motion and a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Number 5, consideration of the agreement for reimbursement of costs recovery for sanitary sewer improvements, City of Franklin contract number 2011-0056 with Rural Plains Partnership for the Goose Creek sanitary sewer line.
This one we want to pull and
So no more.
put it on your work session. There are some additional, there's some additional information. We talked with Adam, Mr. Stuckey and I talked with Adam Bilish this afternoon. There's some additional information that we need to go through. He was going to try to be here to do some explanation of some of it, but he's not here
All right.
yet.
Number 6 is consideration of Resolution 2011-25, a resolution abandoning a sanitary sewer easement in the Gateway Village development.
I passed out before the meeting to all of you a revised copy of this that has been approved by the law department and would recommend approval of it. This is no cost to the city. It's merely getting an easement where where they're changing their plan to change, and then we need to change the sewer and the easement along with the sewer.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
7, consideration of the award of construction contract, City of Franklin contract number 2011-0006 for the Bakers Bridge Avenue and Carruthers Parkway pedestrian traffic signalization project to S&W Contracting Company in the amount of $25,647.50.
Move approval.
Second, but
What, let's go.
go ahead and comment.
That really is not I don't really have a comment. This is something that when this was first built, we did not include pedestrian signals. We do need to go back and get pedestrian signals, et cetera, in place. So
I think you want to talk about this just a minute.
that's fine.
This was, I think it was originally requested by a property owner or a resident in that area, just for ease of crossing.
But Beverly's not here, I say we kill it.
That's why I
I'm
put it.
kidding, of course.
The financial impact, the $25,647.50 is to be paid through the traffic signal capital budget. If we do this, does that mean, you see, we've got 2 more signals that I'm just crazy about, and that's
Those particular
Those
signals
signals.
you're talking about are set up under a capital improvement. This is a signal, it's a separate fund, it's a separate line item. It's not the same line
Well,
item.
does it have to be a separate one? Why couldn't we use this for that?
You could, but I know at least one of them that you're talking about, this amount is,
It wouldn't even come
it
close.
doesn't touch.
You're talking about Carlisle, which is a
Carlisle,
$2 million
yeah.
project.
Yeah,
This is a
it doesn't-
$25,000
It doesn't come
pedestrian
close to
signal. This is something we're doing within the operating capital, and the Carlisle project is a broader general capital investment
We can
project.
talk about that later.
And the other issue right now is we do have sidewalks, handicap ramps, et cetera, but we do not have pedestrian signals. So we're trying to make sure that it's a safer.
We provide a funding in the in the operating budget for this kind of capital on signals and et cetera.
That's another fight.
All in favor, was there a motion and a second?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
8, consideration of change order number 1 with Doss Brothers, Inc. for the general demolition and debris removal, Rebel Meadows Properties, City of Franklin, contract number 2011-0008, in the amount of $1,105, and for a contract time extension of 11 calendar days. Wet weather?
It is wet weather. The amount is for having to remove a tree that the storm
Took
knocked
down.
out, and they removed it, so that's the
And
cost
that was
for
a
removing the tree.
large
It was a
tree.
very large tree. The other is for wet weather that is applicable for a time extension. Doesn't look like they're necessarily going to need the time extension, but we need to go on and carry through and just in case, so.
Okay. Number 9, status update on the integrated water.
Did you vote on that?
Oh, I'm sorry, a motion and approval?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Number 9, status update on the integrated water resource plan.
We have Zach, Daniel here, and Jamie to step through this. Katie's out of country, I understand.
Yeah, see.
No, she's in Paris later this month.
I thought it was Paris, Tennessee.
Well,
The traffic on Lewisburg Pike was because there's a serious personal injury crash there,
Yeah.
by the way.
The traffic on Elizabeth Pike.
all right, we've just got a short presentation. It's been a couple months since
Head on.
we sort of talked a little bit about the status of the Integrated Water Resource Plan. Wanted to come back with a couple of updates to you. We're getting ready to have our first stakeholders meeting of this phase of the work here. As we've discussed previously, we had to get through a large scale of the technical processes so we could get back together as a stakeholder group and then start actually being able to feed some of this technical data back to the stakeholders. We've been going through a lot of this with the steering committee over the last couple of months so they can start then being able to crunch through some of this, and we'll have a little bit of update on that as well, and obviously definitely would like to invite any of y'all that could come to that process, and we'll touch on that in just a second.
Which one did you say?
Yeah, wrong slide, I'm sorry.
July what?
July 12th.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Oh, sorry.
It's July, it's
Mr.
June
Chairman.
Real quickly.
first, isn't
Yeah,
it?
Mr.
the,
Welch has come, so
While we're waiting on that,
she's gonna go back and listen to him
the
about
stakeholder
this.
meeting is at the police headquarters community room on Wednesday, June 1st, from 2 to 5. If any of y'all have a chance to join us for all or any of that portion. As we've discussed before, there's about 17 to 18 members of our stakeholder committee representing neighboring neighboring municipalities and utilities, as well as a lot of representatives from the city of Franklin.
State regulators are
Right.
very much represented as well.
Environmental and community organizations, so.
Sorry, everybody, my apologies.
There it is.
It's a drought.
Sheriff's car with injuries.
We will also record that meeting
Okay,
and make that available to folks as well.
That's something we sort of added is, from some of the feedback in phase one was to be able to video record those meetings as well, so y'all could have a chance to peruse those if you're not able to make it, or citizens see them as well.
We repeat one more time the location.
Sure. It's at the police station community room on June 1st from 2 to 5. My last slide today will sort of give you a brief outline of what that meeting will cover. So our agenda today, just wanted to real quickly update you on the technical subtask. Jamie's going to introduce you a little bit to one of the key phases of the whole process, which is the Harpeth River model itself. There's been a little bit of background in the past for some of the work the state has done developing a river model. We're actually taking some of that data and then taking that a lot further to actually look at that key piece of the entire process, because really that is the center, as you've heard us say before, of this entire process, is how this all interacts with the river. You know, your water permits, your wastewater permits, everything is all tied back to how the Harpeth River and what kind of loadings it has. And we'll also touch real quick, again, like I said, on the stakeholders meeting on the 1st. This is a figure you've seen before. We started out a little bit talking about the wastewater. As we discussed before, basically the TDEC regulations require that you start looking at the process of what are you going to do capacity-wise when you start getting to 80% of your current capacity, which, as you see from the graphic, basically, you know, currently you're running in the 9 to 10 million gallon range. I think you've actually been down a little bit over the last year, but a couple of years ago, we're actually closer to that 10 million gallon a day range. As you see the graph out there, that's the three population.
The other day, we dropped a dime on a 20 million gallon plant, or 12 million gallon plant. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It just seems like it wasn't that long ago that we made a huge investment in a plant that would last a long time.
Well,
And we're getting there.
I think we'll touch on, I think that's probably tied to some of the biosolid stuff, which is one of the things we'll touch on briefly this morning, or this afternoon. But basically what you're seeing here is the population, the red being the city's population projection. We sort of show a range there based on a couple of different data sources, which we've discussed in the past via memo that y'all should all have. But the key thing that we're showing there that we'll discuss on the next slide is sort of that 2030 range, because what we've done is looked at the existing plant with the facilities you have currently and what may be the possibilities of use at that plant. As we well know, we're sort of evaluating, and what we'll do through the Stella model is evaluate the benefits of either expanding or what is the actual potential capacity at the existing plant, and balance that with the construction of a new plant. Whether both of those may eventually need to happen, whether one, sort of the timetable and all that comes in. Based on initial analysis, and we're still doing some actual sampling currently that we're started today, but currently, based on the existing processes you have at the plant, you do have an existing biological capacity that could be increased. Right now, you're limited by the denitrification filters that you have to have for the nutrient limits at the plant, which allow you to get your nitrogen limit and your phosphorus limit in the summer. Both of those are tied to the fact that the Harpeth River is DO limited and organic enrichment and limited through a TMDL process. So obviously the key factor in an existing plant, new plant, either one is all going to be tied to these nutrient limits, primarily nitrogen and phosphorus. If the denitrification factor filters were increased and they weren't the limiting factor, currently we feel like the biological capacity, now this is totally talking about biological capacity, this is actually ability to treat the waste, would be there up to about 18 million gallons annual average daily flow. The limit you see there for total nitrogen of less than 5, total phosphorus of less than 1. Currently our limits are 5 nitrogen, 5 phosphorus in the summer. So what we're looking at is a future regulation. We don't really anticipate that the nitrogen will change quite that much over the next 30 years, but we do anticipate that phosphorus will be tightened over that time period. That your phosphorus limits at the plant will be tightened, and that becomes.
How?
It is all tied back to the more flow you put into the river. Basically, you're limited on the amount of loading you can put into the Harpeth River through the total maximum daily load, which is a figure established by the EPA through a TMDL that was developed for the Harpeth back in 2002. Now, we can, part of the river modeling that Jamie and Kirk are doing will analyze and look at some of that and some of the data that was used to develop that. However, currently, that is how TDEC and EPA set your limits. You're basically giving an allocation, for lack of better words, that this is what you as the City of Franklin can discharge from your point source discharges, where it be 1 point source discharge or 2 point source discharges. That's the amount that the state says is your piece of the pie, for lack of better sake. So,
And why would that change?
this number changes in the fact that the more flow you're discharging, your loading is not going up. So, and therefore your concentration then has to go down.
You mean the more we grow, the more it's going to change?
Right, because you're putting out more flow, so it'd be the same if you're talking about garbage. If you were one person living at your household, you may produce 1 bag of garbage a week, but if you went up to two people, you may produce 2 bags of garbage a week. So as we discharge more flow, our loading stays the same, so something has to go down. And so what happens is that concentration you treat to has to be lower to then put out the same amount of loading. We're also looking at hydraulic analysis. That's why I wanted to touch on that. That was a biological side. We're looking at the hydraulics, because basically when you look at a plant, you have to be able to treat it from a biological standpoint to meet your regulatory flows. You also have to be able to treat it from a hydraulic perspective to be able to pass the flows when the flows are increased during wet weather issues, etc. As we've discussed, and we'll touch on a couple of screens, that's some of the reason we're doing some of the flow monitoring within the collection system that we want to do, to look, is there a cost-effective way to be able to limit some of that I&I infiltration and inflow within the system, so maybe the hydraulics can be lowered. But generally within a typical municipal wastewater plant, you're looking somewhere between the 2.5 to 3 range. So if your capacity at this plant, I think the actual plant capacity was designed at this plant for a 3.1. So if the plant was 12 million gallons a day, then there's a 3.1 multiplier on that 12 to get your actual hydraulic capacity, which is around 38, I believe, for this plant. So we're actually going back based on actual testing and looking at the pipe sizes, the actual flows in the plant, and trying to actually determine what is the actual amount of flow that you could push through this plant. Because ultimately there's 2 pieces. You may have to expand this plant to treat biologically. You also may have to do some tweaks, expand the plant to be able to actually pass the hydraulic flow that would be necessary to be able to actually permit the plant for that high of range. All right. Sorry. From a water treatment plant and distribution system analysis, as we've discussed before, and y'all are well aware, we've done a lot of the city has done a lot of distribution upgrades over the past couple of years, a lot of interconnections to try to be able to better supply the city consistently with water. And based on your connections with other utilities and primarily your additional connection with Harpeth Valley, water capacity itself from a water capacity standpoint is not really an issue, and I think everyone is pretty aware of that. The bigger issue at this point, in addition to looking at the plant, and once we get into the actual Stella modeling, we get all the data together, we'll start doing some Stella runs with the decision tool to be able to determine and balance that. Do we keep the existing plant at 2 million? Do we expand to 4 million? Or do we look at buying all our water in Harpeth Valley? Obviously, we'll look through multiple different scenarios at that point. The bigger issue from both a plant and the distribution system side currently is more the upcoming regulations and the regulations that already exist concerning distribution byproducts and system regulatory pieces that are fairly new, that are slowly being enacted. There probably are some changes that the city's going to make at either at the water plant itself or within the distribution system to be able to treat these, to put in place ways to be in compliance with these regulatory pieces. Basically, over the last couple of years, and it'll become mandatory at each specific point in the next couple of years, you have to actually monitor within your system itself. It's primarily tied to the chlorination of water that you put out to make sure you're killing all the bacteria and viruses in the water, and how long the water is in the system. The fact that a large majority of the water comes from a third-party supplier, Harbor Valley Utilities, that water has to travel all the way from the Cumberland and their treatment plant to get here. So there's some issues with the distribution system that will have to be addressed from a regulatory standpoint. So really that's one of the big key pieces as far as this phase goes in regards to the water system. Biosolids, I think, Dana, you were touching on this. I think the money that y'all just allocated last week was to rehab the belt filter presses, if I'm not.
He was referring to the plant expansion from.
I've been here too long.
Oh, okay. Well, I did know that y'all passed rehab, and biosolids, as we've discussed before, is a key piece of this because it is sort of the linchpin of sustainability that you don't have right now. I mean, to remind everyone, you're currently just dewatering your sludge and then trucking it to Camden, Tennessee, about 110 miles each way. If at any time there was any indication that landfill decided they wouldn't take it anymore, then you're looking at taking it somewhere else. At the point before Nashville expanded their biosolids facility, they were having to truck it almost to Louisville, Kentucky, to find a place to take their biosolids. As we went through this process and met with the steering committee and some of the key stakeholders, it became evident that we wanted to look at Class A type of solids. What that does is it opens up a lot of different land applications or farming, et cetera, a lot of different ways to get rid of the sludge besides having to truck it and put it in the landfill and pay a tipping fee, which is only continue to increase.
What do they do with it now, the biosolid sludge? How is it being used of these?
It basically just goes to a landfill the same way your garbage does. So it's
We
basically,
used to spread it out over the fields.
That's correct.
And then we had subdivisions that built around it, and they didn't like the odor.
well, there's also regulation.
Not exactly.
Yeah, there's also some regulations that tie you into being able to do that. Now,
The odor in large part came from the treatment plant
It
too.
was the ATED
It was
system.
the ATAD
But
system. The
we did spread it,
odor
but
problem
we-
was largely resolved when we renovated the plant, although at the time we were still spreading in the fields.
But the spreading of the fields had to stop because we'd already overloaded the fields, basically. And is the permitting to be able to do what that type of situation was just, we couldn't do. That's the reason we had to stop spreading.
Margaret, when it grew corn 28 feet high, we overloaded the field.
Do I?
When we grew corn 28 feet high, it overloaded the field.
Couldn't repeat
Yeah.
that, I didn't get,
No,
not
it's
everybody heard
just,
that.
your back is to me, so I just couldn't understand what.
Regulatory changes
Yeah, we
combined
could
with
not-
saturation of the field required an alternative disposal method, at which point we began doing the dewatering, trucking the dewatered sludge.
right. Yeah, going to Class A would allow you a lot more openings to do different things.
Because then, at that point, it's not a biohazard anymore.
Right.
It's more like mulch.
That's correct. You're doing things to it to treat it to a level where the pathogen level is, there's no potential harm to the people that would come in contact with it. And that's the main concern now is at the level you treat to currently, the only real option is to take it to a landfill. So basically you have a very old system, biosolids wise. A lot of the equipment is getting to its useful life. That's why you're rehabbing some of the belt filter presses. But ultimately, I think you want to get through, I mean, the plan is to get through till we decide what the best process of this. The key thing that we've looked at currently is as we look at the possibility of a new plant versus expanding the existing plant versus a little bit of both, we looked at, okay, from a cost and feasibility standpoint, where does it make sense to have a biosolids facility? Do we have a separate facility at both plants if you end up with both plants at one day? Or do you plan to have one facility and then deal with transporting the biosolids from one to the other? And what, from our analysis to this point, it makes sense to go forward with the plan to have one biosolids facility, and then either as that second plant comes on site, if needed in the future, then you would take everything from that plant and then transport it to the existing plant and treat it all at one location, as opposed to having two separate facilities.
So what is your 12 million gallon capacity now?
That's current. That's what your permit says you can do today.
You mentioned 18. What's the process to go to 18 again? I know you just went over that.
Well,
Sum that up for a layman.
well, currently you have, from a biological standpoint, you have a system in place as far as basins and treatment capacity to go to approximately 18 if you expanded the denitrification filters. That does not include.
We'd have to expand the denitrification because to continue to meet our permit.
Right.
In other words, we have the physical plant to treat 18.
Except in the day that you would have a hydraulic, you physically cannot treat 18 through the denitrification filters that you have now.
Right. We have to add denitrification filters, at which point we would have capacity, physical capacity for 18, and then make a permit application.
That's correct.
Okay. And along the way, upgrade our ability to deal with sludge / biosolids.
Right. You're looking at doing something with biosolids no matter which way you go, because what you have now is getting fairly old in service life and also is not very sustainable. We don't know how long that process will be viable. I think it became evident that everybody feels like going to Class A sludge, where you have a lot more options, is a good long-term plan. And so that would require upgrades, you're correct, at each plant. And then on top of that, there could be additional hydraulic bottlenecks within the plant that would also possibly have to be expanded. And that's what we're trying to do, some hydraulic. Unfortunately, we've had so much rain, the plant's been processing a lot more flow. We've got a lot of high-level flow measurements. We want to sort of get a baseline measurement so we can better compare what the actual plant can push through. So luckily, it's starting to be dry a little bit.
So we're at 6 now, running through.
About 8 to 9.
8 to 9?
Yeah, most average days.
And that's just an average day. That's not without the inflow, infiltration, high water, lots of rain.
I&I days, you're easily over 20. I think a couple days last week, you were actually up closer to 30. So, I mean, you're pushing from where we're at hydraulically now. I think when you get to about 30, you're pushing the capabilities of the plant. At that point, it becomes hard for you to keep it within the system, and be able to treat it actually at the plant.
During the flood, we managed 35 for a period of time, but we couldn't sustain 35 indefinitely. So I think our max is likely somewhere around 30 or just over 30 MGD.
And that's really what we're trying to confirm now, because obviously with a couple of upgrades and everything else, we just want to make sure what's actually there matches the plans, and it truly is hydraulically capable of passing what it should. So, oh, sorry, you're fine. Jamie's going to touch on a little bit, like I mentioned, the river model is sort of the core of the whole piece, because everything. All these permit limits we're talking about all tie back, like I was discussing the TMDL earlier, all tie back to what the Harpeth River, from a regulatory standpoint, can hold, and that's what the river model sort of ties together.
So if you'll remember, in phase 1, we created a model, an integrated model of Franklin's system of water, how it flows through the city, and didn't concentrate on the river itself. And that was good for high-level conceptual planning, and we're going to continue to use that model. As Zach has mentioned, it's called the Stella model when he says that. We're going to continue to use that to evaluate the alternatives as we get more refined information on the individual systems, the wastewater and the water. But in phase 2, what we're doing is developing a detailed in-stream water quality model of the Harpeth River so that we can evaluate the effect of Franklin's plan on the river and help this plan get permitted. So the model was selected in cooperation with TDEC. It was actually, the model itself was developed by TDEC on a small scale, and we're expanding that to cover a longer time period. We selected it in cooperation with the steering committee, and what you see up here on the slides are an example of the output that we'll be able to show you when we run the model, and this is just the preliminary small scale results that TDEC gave us. And what you see, the red line is the modeled dissolved oxygen in the river, and the black line is the observed dissolved oxygen in the river. And on the left, it's kind of a zoomed out view of the whole month of August, and as you zoom in, you can see that the model does a really good job of capturing the diurnal fluctuations in dissolved oxygen in the river. So we'll be expanding this to multiple year simulations to evaluate those alternatives and their effect on the river.
Because really what happens when we talk about nitrogen and phosphorus earlier, it's really all tied back in the TMDL to the dissolved oxygen in the river. And that's really, the state standard is 5, and a lot of the times, especially during the summer, the river itself falls below that 5 range. And that's what drives a lot of the permit limits for the city. That's why they're so stringent, because of the discharge into the river itself. Sort of talking about a couple of other pieces that sort of tie directly into this, just really, you can go ahead, sorry. Just a couple of updates on a couple other pieces. That's where stormwater is a big piece of this overall plan, in the fact that stormwater is also a big load from a nitrogen and phosphorus standpoint. If we can get a better handle on how much loading that is, look at some cost-benefit analysis on specific projects the city may implement, such as Dry Branch, which was implemented, which takes out a lot of sediment loading and other loading to the river. There's some benefits to being able to reduce some of the stormwater load, which may open up potentially some opportunities to increase some of the wastewater loading if we can be able to prove some of the stormwater loading is reduced through some future projects. So what we're doing, we're going back and looking at some of the master planning work that was previously done, primarily from a quantity-based standpoint, primarily from a flood control, water quantity passage-based standpoint, get the water out of the tributaries into the Harpeth. Looking at some of those now from a quality-based standpoint, based on some standards, looking at some of these projects and implementing water quality-based improvements as well in association with some of these to remove nitrogen and phosphorus and BOD that are put into the river system through stormwater runoff. So that's a big piece of the stormwater side. Obviously, with all of these, we're trying to get all the technical data together, and then we'll look at the cost-benefit analysis of, if I do this, does it save me money here? Just like we're talking about, if I spend this money on stormwater, can I ultimately save money here on wastewater, or be able to push out upgrades on wastewater to a further future time period and be able to spread that money out further? So that's how all these sort of projects tie together ultimately. That's why, as we went through each of the technical pieces individually, now we're sort of starting bringing some of this stuff together and sort of analyzing it in a combined method. Distribution system, we talked a little bit about, we're actually going back through doing some high-level master planning of the distribution system as well, to look at 30 years out, where is there any quantity-based issues as well within the system where we need to continue in the future to make future interconnections, make future large diameter transmission or distribution system improvements over the next 30 years. Collection system, as most of y'all are aware, we had a SSR, a separate contract, to actually take some flow monitoring data. We actually have that data as of this week. That will help us go back and analyze the collection system, look for locations where we may be able to do projects to reduce that I&I into the system, as we were talking about earlier, and may be able to push out some of these upgrades at the existing plant. You know, if we could reduce by 1 million or 2 million gallons during some of those, the average or some of those storm period times, then you're able to push out some of the improvements you have to do. So there may be some cost benefit to doing some improvements within the collection system itself. So we'll be able to analyze this data and look for specific areas that tend to be your higher areas of infiltration or inflow based on the data that we've seen. And we've sure had enough rain to be able to collect a lot of data over the last 2 months. Ecological restoration, the same sort of way. As you remember, one of the key stakeholder objectives was to also make the Harpeth River more of an aesthetic and a recreational and a usable, functional piece of the city, to really bring it back to the highlight. Some of this ecological restoration, especially after the flood, received a lot of damage from erosion, flooding, etc. So we're looking at some of those improvements, costing some of those out as well. There's a lot of sediment-based transport into the river, the same way with the stormwater runoff that occurs from some of those stream bank that we could restore and see some benefit from those. Finally, the reclaimed water. We're looking, although there was a recent master plan done about 2 years ago, we're looking at additional demand projections, additional opportunities within the city or possibly within the UGB to look at some potential opportunities for reclaimed water. The reclaimed water, as you recall from some of the schematics we had shown before, is sort of a balance. There's a balance between how much water we put back in the Harpeth, what our limits are, and then how much water we use within the system from a reclaimed water standpoint. All of these things, we're looking at stormwater harvesting as well. Could we, similar to what they're doing at the police station, where they take water off the roof of the police station, use it for irrigation, could we retrofit some city facilities? Is there enough that we could save from a runoff standpoint and reuse some of that? But it's all about balancing, because like I said, ultimately the Harpeth is the key centerpiece, because we got to have enough base flow in there to sort of be able to maintain the discharges we have. So that's sort of where we are on each piece. As I said, at the meeting on June 1st, we'll have a little bit more data and go into a lot more specifics on some of these with the stakeholders. As we mentioned, that meeting is on June 1st from 2 to 5. Since this is the first meeting we've had with them since Phase 2 started, we're going to go back through some of the Phase 1 options and alternatives, review those. Some of the things have come, for instance, the last time we met with them, the Cumberland River water line, for instance, was still a potential option. So that obviously, but through board action, has been taken off the table. There's some others that, from what we've looked at so far, just aren't feasible options anymore. So we'll go back through these with the stakeholders, look back at how those options, maybe even there may be some new options that have come up that people may have interest in looking at. We'll go back through some of these preliminary findings in more detail that we discussed tonight, actually go through some actual process analysis and some of the actual numbers to look at where we may be from a new facility or expansion standpoint. Discuss the water quality model in more in depth, show them some runs with some of the things that Jamie's working on. And then go back through, as I discussed, some facilitated discussions with them based on this new information. And then look for them to provide us some more input as we move forward with the technical analysis over the next phase, to be able to take their feedback and further analyze each of those technical options as we move towards making some actual recommendation on from the plan. We'll actually meet with them again in sort of the October, November, with potentially one additional meeting, but moving towards an October, November schedule of actually having a plan to them to start discussing and sort of finalizing which one of these alternatives seems to score the best through the Stella model and be the best long-term plan for the city. So, yes, sir.
I want to go back to the question of dissolved oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we show that maybe physically we could treat 18 million gallons.
Right.
But even at 9, it looked like we were kind of flirting with what the state maximum was for dissolved oxygen during low flow.
Yeah.
How will we accomplish that at 18 million?
The key thing is like Alderman Clinton was saying earlier, if you expand this existing plant or you build a new plant, you're still ultimately going to have to go back and get a new permit, no matter if it's at a new facility or at the existing facility. Mm-hmm. You're expanding your capacity. I think as Jamie would tell you, and she may have something to add, currently the DO within the river as it comes into the city itself is already impaired. So what we're trying to show, I mean, it's a long technical process, and Mike, you're probably as aware as anybody that it's a back and forth with TDEC and EPA on sort of justifying, showing the data that we're coming up with, balancing with some of the things they've done in the past, and sort of showing that the key is showing that what we're adding to the system is not in any way negatively affecting the Harpeth River itself. And we're pretty confident at this point, based on what we've seen, that a lot of these upgrades that we're going to be able to make, that you're going to be able to make as a city, will show no negative effect on the Harpeth itself. And that's sort of the key piece. You know, it's pretty easy to justify upgrades at your facilities or new facilities if you can show TDEC, here I've got, 5 years, 6 years of data, and if I put this new plant discharge here, you're not going to see any differential change in the DO. And that was one of the key points, as Jamie said. We had multiple meetings with TDEC on the river model itself, because the first thing we wanted to do before we moved forward was get their buy-in on what we were using. Because if they sort of buy into the model we're using, then ultimately there's not going to be as many questions at the end when the results of that model show hopefully what we think it will. I don't know if that sort of addressed your question or not, but
Mike, I think the key is that even though you're discharging more flow, our assumption is that the mass limit's going to stay the same, which is why the concentration goes down. So the contribution from the plant, even at a higher flow, in terms of things that might have an impact on dissolved oxygen, are the same. It's the same as the flow it is now, because the concentrations go up.
I don't see how the mass is going to stay the same.
Because you lower the concentration.
Zach.
Well, the other issue.
We'll have to have more treatment with that plant.
yes.
But the other issue is that we're actually putting back into the Harpeth River a higher DO level than what's in the Harpeth River. So that is something that benefits us in regards to that. We can't degrade what's coming to us. So we're putting it back in at a higher DO level.
Zach, this may be a little early to ask this, but with what you know right now, and all this information that you have, when do you think, can you give us a ballpark date as to when we would need to have another plant?
Well, I think that sort of goes back to the first slide that we had. I mean, if you could expand the existing plant hydraulically and biologically and get a permit for it to 18, then that would, based on population projections now, that would push you out. I don't remember what it showed on the, I think 2030.
2030.
Right. Now that's not saying you would, I mean, that's not a as-is situation as we've discussed. I mean, that includes some money. And basically, that's sort of what it becomes, and that's what the Stella model will allow us to do. We'll know what the cost of expanding the existing plant, we'll know what the cost of building a new plant and what the ramifications of that are, and it becomes both cost and non-cost factors that weigh into that say, should we expand what we have now, or should we look at building a new plant, or is it a combination of both, or where does that schedule sort of fall in that entire process?
Okay, maybe what I want to know is, at what point are we going to have to make the decision to do one or the other?
Well, I mean, I think ultimately, like you see here, you're already sort of at what TDEC would consider a planning phase need. So, I mean, I think once you get to, this October, November, December, when we finalize this plan and bring it to you as something to discuss, at that point, you're basically making sort of a long-term decision on here's what we sort of agree or disagree with what we should do over the next 30 years. And our plan is, as part of this plan, it will have a schedule in it that'll sort of lay out each of these major projects and say, based on what we're analyzing and where we think we'll be, this is where you need to build that facility.
And I would see that as part of the outcome of phase 2 of this process, that we would make those kind of decisions or present that kind of information to the board to give that direction.
So we won't push this into the background and forget about it, and then suddenly we come up and
That's
say,
why we're doing this.
Yeah, it's very similar to the process y'all sort of taken with the transportation, where when we get through this, you're basically going to have a ranked, scheduled protocol. Now, that's not to say that things won't change in the next 30 years. I mean, it's something that you can't just say this is never going to change in the next 30 years, but it's going to really lay out your major infrastructure needs over the next 30 years based on these population and growth projections. And it'll sort of, at the end of this, as Eric said, it'll sort of lay out, here's sort of the decision we made, starting in, it'll be something that Mark will be able to budget around. This is the schedule that I've got direction to move forward with.
that's good.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank y'all.
Number 10, discussion regarding funding of the Eastern Flank Battlefield Road.
Mr. Chairman, if you would, if we could, I'd like for you to go back to number
4,
5.
Mr. Ballas is here now to speak to some of the issues concerning the sewer recovery.
I apologize for running a little behind. I think I got caught in traffic that Mr. McClendon was referencing. But, I don't know what was mentioned earlier besides just referral.
We had
or deferral.
Deferral, and we had some additional information we had to look at.
Okay. So I think what we talked about generally earlier today, after receiving the memo and information yesterday, was kind of some of the sewer shed plans that had been originally presented to Boyle back in '05 when we originally went through kind of concept plans for Berry Farms. And based on some SSR watershed studies, we essentially went back and modified our design to include what's now called the Goose Creek Sanitary Sewer Project as part of the Berry Farms project. Earlier, we had original sewer layouts that did not include this line, because of the fact we were able to sewer our property off of essentially the 5-mile interceptor, planning that coming through without having to go this additional line to the west. So we shared that documentation with David and Eric today, and just simply requested a week or two to look through this information in hopes that we have kind of a more detailed picture to paint to you all in, I guess, 2 weeks, if it's back on the agenda for your development workshop at that time. But I think just in general with where Berry Farm stands, I know Alderman Skinner and I had a conversation a couple weeks ago. Given that's his ward, we have started construction at Berry Farms. We are moving forward with approximately 50 residential units and then about 60 or 80,000 square feet of commercial. But it's all kind of located in the Goose Creek Bypass, Lewisburg Pike kind of intersection in that node, and have hopes of delivering that if weather holds up, kind of towards the end of this year, November, December or so. But we appreciate your all's consideration of the Lewisburg Pike agreement and look forward to presenting some of this additional information on the sewer recapture. So if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Thank you.
We're going to spend time over the next week or so working with Adam through those issues. We expect to bring that to you at the work session on the 24th. And actually, depending on how that all lays out too, to help facilitate all this continuing to move, the road impact element would be on that voting meeting. We may look to ask you to work in the sewer impact fee also at both meetings, the work session and the voting meeting. And we'll try to provide you with some information in advance of that as well, so you're ready to do that. So we needed this time to work a little more through with Adam and some of the points he brought up with David and I, and we want to take that back to our team and bring it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologize for the...
Number 10, discussion regarding funding of the Eastern Flank Battlefield Road.
I don't know.
Well, let me give you some update on that, and this is one we've been awaiting some word on the grant funding, about $1 million worth of grant funding through the state enhancement grant program. And essentially what we have heard is that we will not receive that grant this year. And essentially there's a couple other projects in Williamson County that have already been in the pipeline or committed to, at least in one case, by the prior administration. And so there's only about $8 million for the whole state for this, and Williamson County's already got a pretty big chunk of it. We think we have an excellent chance to be considered in a year from now. And just wanted to bring that news to you. That's something to consider as you look at the capital investment program. One of the things we had been prepared to talk about a meeting or so ago was to look at design. I would suggest that we go ahead and start moving towards the design component of that. I think David has the design cost number down around $32,000 at this point, which is, I think, better than half of what we were looking at a year ago. So we've refined that, but the more we know what we're asking them to design, the better they can hone that number down, and then we know what we're looking at. I think as you move forward, you look at that project, I would suggest we pursue a grant again to try to fund it. It's always better to get those outside dollars and leverage our local dollars, and look at that. If we would by chance not get that, I think we can look at an option to still fund that project and move it forward in the hotel motel tax fund. We're getting closer to the time that the conference center obligation drops off in the latter part of 2013. So that could free up some capacity, and we could look at a way to tie in that capacity with the additional funding we might need if we didn't get the grant. So those are all things to kind of chew on as we look at it. I know Alderman Skinner and folks from the Battlefield Commission are very interested as well, and we can maybe use this time to get the design, focus in on the issues around design, use the money the board's already allocated for that portion, and then look at pursuing the grant opportunity going forward. So,
I'd like to share that with this the Battlefield Commission meeting this morning, they endorsed that we would devote the entire next meeting to meeting with David Parker and Eric to look at specific design and costs related to just the road, so that we could finally agree on this is, whether it be a loop, whether it be a two-way, what the expense estimates would be for that. And then go and look at what our capacity is to fund that. And we can proceed with that. One of the things they had to do with this last grant was it was not supposed to be just for a road. It was supposed to be enhancement. We can reconfigure our grant for next year to be the enhancement and the interpretations connected to the battlefield with the road. So, the first step is, one, to get a clear idea of which specific design we want so that we can turn it over to the design. Get a clear estimate of what the cost of that would be, and then proceed on that basis. So the Battlefield Commission is eager and waiting to take a look at this at the June the 9th meeting. If we wait till 2013 to actually get this started, I think we will have missed a great opportunity for our heritage visitors to really understand what we're doing at Eastern Plain Battlefield. So there is a certain pressure for us to get this completed before we get in past the sesquicentennial. So we'll have much more information, I hope, after this Battlefield Commission meeting on June the 9th.
So next month, you all should be able to come to
Yes.
us with a recommendation from
Yes.
the commission.
And here's what the design would be, and here's what the estimated costs would be.
And you want what now? You want a meeting with Eric and Dave?
The commission.
And the commission?
Yeah, the Battlefield Commission are the ones that are supposed to give recommendations to the board about things of the Battlefield Park. That is their primary specific function. And they haven't really had that much input into some of this in the past. So.
We're glad to continue on that path. We do want to get the design rolling here fairly soon. So we would look to bring that to the board for consideration in June.
Well, I think we have a choice. I wouldn't minimize the Battlefield, but if you sit here and you look at 50 projects, I don't necessarily prioritize the Battlefield Road any more or any less than I do some of the other road projects that we have. So,
Well,
and
it's
that's
already been selected as the first small project last year. We've already prioritized.
well, but it's already gotten out of the small project range, Mike. The small
No.
project range. Oh yes.
That remains to be seen.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
so.
okay. Well,
But then
spend whatever time you
so
need.
did Nichols Mill up there too, so it happens.
We got about $360,000 identified within the hotel motel tax fund for this project. We'll work with the commission.
Wasn't the
to
number
bring some
like 700 or
recommendations.
something?
Sure.
There's a whole range of costs on this.
There's a variant, and that's what, excuse me, that's what Alderman Skinner's asked us to go present the various alternatives for roadway and the cost associated with all those alternatives. If you'll remember, we presented that. There's, 4 or 5 different alternatives or something, so.
Couple different widths.
Widths.
Yeah.
So Eric, Alderman Skinner talked to me the other night about it, and I told him, yeah, I don't have a problem doing that. We'll try to,
So that's
get it-
June the 9th?
June the 9th.
June the 9th at
So
7
there
or
may not
something
be a
like
Cadillac
that.
version of a road, who knows?
There'll be some options, and we can bring those to you with the commission's recommendation.
I think it's very important. This is a new commission. This is what we've selected it, and that they have significant input into this for them to be a viable commission.
But there will be options.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what we hear.
Yes.
All right. Number 11, discussion on the fiscal year 2011-2015 CIP prioritization.
We had this on your agenda the other night, and for some reason people got noisy and we didn't get to talk about it, so. What we're,
I see what you did there.
But we also had it on this agenda thinking we wouldn't get to it on your work session.
we had follow-up
But the last time we discussed, we went through presentation and we asked that we get some feedback of what you want to do, how you want to proceed with the prioritization. And that's basically what we're doing now, is we're just coming to you saying that we're needing to get the board, ultimately, all of you's feedback of our decision of how we're going to proceed with the prioritization, or how we're going to proceed with the projects, I guess is one way to put it, that have been identified, if that's the case. So it's no presentation tonight other than just to ask you to to just further state that we need to get this done. And
Send in our forms?
Well, there's no,
Well, that's one of the things we presented to you sort of a package, and how you want to deal with that package, or if you want to reprioritize again, or how you want to do it, and how this committee wants to weigh in that versus the full board is, I guess, there's some process here, as well as how you want to move forward on projects.
I have a question before you really get into that. Letter G and H, they're sort of, there we go again. Somewhere in this town, and I don't know what street it's on, but there's a something on wheels, a stand on wheels with a traffic light. In this
Right on Del Rio.
So Del Rio, we
temporary.
had a failure on the signal.
Oh, okay, all right. Why can't we do something without having to spend $2 million or $2,000 for a traffic light? Why can't we do something to help those people? That traffic is backed up on Carlisle every day, twice a day. And they are worn out with it, and I don't blame them.
Well, the whole problem we have with Carlisle is the alignment of the intersection. And for us to go in and try to signalize and have offsets and not have the intersection itself correct, we're actually introducing liabilities to us by trying to do something like that. You could do it, but you're going to create yourselves more problems, and we introduce ourselves with more liability situations should something happen, which is more than likely will when you have all that type offsetting and trying to do it with a signalized. So we need to fix the intersection as we're signalizing it. So that's the reason the cost went up so much, is to get the alignment of the intersection correct.
So it doesn't look like we're ever going to have however many, how much you say?
It's a $2 million project.
$2 million. So they can just kiss that goodbye.
Not if you choose to fund it.
So what are we going to have to cut? The Carton Lane, the Carton Street?
You have to lobby the rest of us to make us feel that is the most important thing in this city to do.
I can't tell you that.
Well, yes, you can.
You can tell us that.
You can tell us that.
Oh, I'm not.
But that's not totally how it works. You've got X amount of money, and you've got 10 or 15 projects, so what have you got? That Carlisle Lane is in the project, and it's been on my list, and I've got 5 or 6 items on the list in Carlisle Lane, and the alignment is on the list then. So I don't expect to see that drop out, Margaret, but I expect to see us have a way to fund that, and to put that traffic signal out there and not align that traffic signal is not in the area where we want to be. And as far as traffic backed up at Carlisle, you can pick any road in Franklin. You pick East Main, anywhere you want to go at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it'll be backed up from First Avenue past First Tennessee Bank. I was backed up into the intersection Monday, I guess it was, into the Back Hatcher, Franklin Road intersection, heading northbound. So it was backed up from Moore's Lane all the way back. So it's not, so it's backed up everywhere.
At least there's a light, eventually it'll let you out.
Well, yes.
There's not in these two areas.
Well, and Carlisle has been certainly on our radars for as long as, for several years now. So that's not a good statement to make, because if it's been on the radar for several years, we haven't done a heck of a lot about it. But there's other things that we haven't done things about either. So But I don't expect us to drop, I'm not gonna drop Carlisle.
We've done the design work just in this last year to
Yeah.
get ready to build it if you choose to fund it. So we've been making progress to get it ready, and now is the choice of if you include that in what you're gonna fund in this update on the capital investment plan.
So at this point, it's all or none, the 2 million, it's no,
You really need to do the whole project.
And we have pretty well phased back Carlisle Lane to this point for the signalization, to where we can get it signalized. I mean, Carlisle Lane originally was all the way over to Del Rio Pike and correcting over there also. So, yes, it's already been phased.
well, with Margaret, if there's no signal, that's one thing. If there is a signal and there's backup, that's a whole different problem. But if there's no signal at all, then that does raise things to a different level.
So you want input from us. I liked the score sheet, turning in a ranking, having staff accumulate the rankings, and then having a conversation about the accumulated rankings.
I did too.
I like also what the staff already put together, what you all put together, and your recommendation, really, that's what it.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I want the recommendations of the professionals.
Yeah.
As I make political choices.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna give it to us 1 through 10. What you saw.
We gave it to you.
Well,
We gave it to you.
You divided it
We
up.
gave you a package.
You divided it up into streets and parks and this and this.
Now, that divided up was the individual rankings within those departments was that overall. Then we gave you what myself and the two assistant city administrators and administrator looked at as far as what we thought for overall priorities should be. We gave it as a package. Instead of ranking each one of those, then we gave you as, I think it's 7 projects plus the alternate for Carlisle Lane, the Carlisle Board Mill intersection. So we did that. We did not rank those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're saying, we were looking at it as with how we highlighted it and working with Mr. Truill is in your funding plan, et cetera, that we could take that highlighted things that we had there on and start working on them and meet with your funding plan. So that's the reason we did that. The 7.
Wait,
The 7.
let me say, I think we have not discussed that part of it. I have seen the numbers that were presented to us, but actually we have not discussed all of that. And that is one of the things that I want to do in the long run, is to look at that and see exactly how those numbers work out and the implications of them, because some of them, you know, we're talking about, we're paying off $5 or $6 million a year, but then we now moved over that Hillsborough Road is going to be $11 million next year, and I think 11 or 12 the next year. So whenever we're talking about the money that we have, we need to look at that as the big picture. I mean, I like the ideas of going ahead and ranking ourselves too, but I still think we need to have a total board discussion about those numbers that were given. They were just given to us. We had no opportunity to really ask questions about that.
Thought we had discussed them.
We did not, because I was not able to ask the questions that I wanted to ask about those numbers. And I'm still not sure about some of them.
Well, I'd like to take those and go on with it. I think we've talked enough about it. I have talked enough about it.
Well, I will tell you that when I thought we were going to have the meeting on Tuesday night, I had asked to have some other numbers brought up about how much our total indebtedness has gone up in the last 10 years, from $20 million to $120 million, and that doesn't include everything that we borrowed in this fiscal year here. So we have not had an opportunity, in my opinion, to discuss that.
Okay, this is a meeting opportunity. When will the next one be? Because
What do you want to do?
I sit on the agenda because it sounds like I'm ready to move forward with the ranking and whatever. But if there's a need for the unity of the board to
Is there a consensus around you all submitting rankings as well?
I like the rankings.
You like what?
I like the rankings.
You like what they did?
Well, I like to be able to.
Submit your individual
Put 'em all.
rankings.
Individual,
Along with the package, along with the
Yeah.
other priorities within each category that the department directors have provided as well.
Right.
Okay.
and I think
Mr.
Ann's
Skinner?
concern goes a little further.
One of
She's,
the things, yes, we got the packet and we saw what those priorities were, but there wasn't really an explanation why those over something else. Could we have a discussion with staff on how they arrived at some of those?
Well,
or-
you're talking about the individual departments' rankings, not a discussion of why they're over. The ones that we put together as the 7, we have under their explanation for priority.
We're glad to
We're
talk
trying
about that
say-
further.
We can talk further. That's what we did at the
Yeah.
last meeting where we
Yeah,
went through all
I've read
that.
through that, but most of it's an explanation on, so why those are more important than maybe some of the other things in your eyes, as far as the big picture of things, and maybe there's something we haven't considered. And I think we ought to have that discussion before we go to our rankings.
You considered the funding, didn't you? And you considered that they were somewhere toward the top of former priorities.
The acquisition of the property on Columbia has just come up this year. That's never been.
What was that, the acquisition where?
Public Works facility.
Public Works facility. Well, what we've presented you is out of the CIP book. And it's the 4 of us as far as the last sheet. Now, the other sheets is the individual departments doing their rankings. The 4 of us looked at what we thought was achievable based on the funding plan and looking at what gives some spread of improvements throughout the city, not just streets, but also some fire hall, the public works facility, parks, et cetera, not tying it all down to one thing. So it was something that 4 of us got together and looked at, and we thought it sort of spread the abilities of the city for the next year across the city to try to get some things done, try to get some designs done, where we can start really looking at then the future construction, because that's all we're talking about,
and
most
that's
of
what,
the street stuff.
and that's what I was impressed with, because you looked at what could be achievable, and you gave some forethought to that, in my opinion.
We thought we did.
Well, you have
Because you were
explanation
based on
for
it.
priority.
Based on the budget of what could be done. And I think if we just start ranking, we may not necessarily have all that budgetary information. We just gonna
Yeah.
see what we like or what should be, and not look at the budgetary side. You guys, when you all looked at it, you all looked at the project, looked at how it would fit in the current budget plan, and then made those decisions, which I thought was just great. And I'm willing to work within that. But, yeah.
We're ready to do what you want us to do, how you
And
want us
that's my
to do
opinion.
it, so.
Yeah.
Well, I think the process worked well when we got your recommendations, we got your summaries and analysis. We made our individual assessment, you compiled them, and we came together and had a meeting, and anybody could ask whatever they wanted, and then we had an opportunity to reorder things. So, I mean, that seemed to work. That allows a multiple-step process to get to a good decision on a major, multifaceted issue.
Okay, so close us in.
Do
When we
you,
need to
do
that?
you, so there are a number of people saying they want to submit rankings again.
Yep.
Do you feel that you have enough information, or do you need more discussion before you submit those rankings, or do we want to
Well,
start
we're only
that
voting for 1 through 10,
in
right?
process and give us a 1 through 10 between
Look,
now and give you a week or so to submit those, or
I don't think
is that
we
enough
need,
time, or-
I don't particularly want to have, speaking for myself, I don't particularly want to have a long meeting about minutiae that one phone call to a department head by one alderman could resolve. I may not have a question that matters, and it may be a question and answer that gets repeated at a meeting, because it should matter to everyone. But there's no rule that says that if I have a question about a budget item or a CIP item, that I can't filter that through staff by email, phone call, or otherwise, and say, tell me why this, or what if we did this? I mean, that's permitted.
Okay. Well,
Mayor?
I think some of the ranking process may help us decide between consideration for a new fleet facility, where that ranks in our mind, versus Carlisle Lane. So that's the way I see the ranking may be helping us move forward. You know, I personally like what staff has done. They've really worked hard on it and given us lots of options, and I think we are really spreading the opportunity completely across the board rather than just 2 or 3 road projects.
Yeah, I don't want to have a meeting at which we ask every department head to come in here and be prepared to field any question that anyone might throw at them about anything in the CIP. That does not sound to me to be a productive event.
We would need the decibel meter.
Right. At the same time, if somebody feels like they need that background information, go get it.
Yeah, we're always available to follow up on specific projects or groups of projects or whatever folks need to provide that. And so that's always available to you. There's the book, there's stuff online, and there's individual staff members. We'd be glad to help with that in any way we can.
All right.
Is there anything we need to provide to you for you to do your rankings as far as list or whatever?
A nice, tidy ballot.
We'll send you we have the ranking spreadsheets we can send out to you again like we did last year and tally them.
Suits me.
Okay.
All right. 12, street project status report. Okay. 13, water management project status reports. Hey, it's like an auction.
That's right. Going,
Move on. Margaret already talked about hers, so we
Yeah.
14, stormwater project status report.
I do want to bring up one thing on the stormwater, and that is the Liberty Creek Watershed Improvements Project that we have going right now. We have received word that, well, to start with, we're receiving bids next week on this project. But we have received word back that due to the federal budgeting process and cutting things, we may not be able to keep the grant that we had allocated for that. Just want to throw it out there right now. We can discuss, and Eric Gardner and I discussed this briefly today. We felt that it's probably best to get the bids and then find out a little bit more if we can about that grant, if we can. If not, then when we come to you for the award of the bid, we can discuss what we really want to do in regards to that. But we just found this out today, so. But I did want to note that to you, where you know as much as we do, as much as we can.
Have we missed it?
We
What
had
happened?
we had a deadline before, and with everything that happened last year, the flood and everything, this was the type of project that needs to be done later in the spring, later in the summer when the weather's dry. There was no way we were going to be able to do it last year with the flooding and everything.
And so we missed it.
So the deadline was, I believe it was April, and we David had received a letter from EPA. We responded to them, told them what our time frame was. They seemed to accept what our time frame was as far as bidding and starting construction. And then just this morning we heard that because of budget cuts with federal, at the federal level, we can ask for I guess an extension to it. Don't know for sure what will happen. They did say that going forward with the bidding process will not hurt us in any way. There's still a possibility that we bid it. It comes in lower than what we thought, where you guys would feel comfortable to go ahead and still accept that bid. We start construction, and they could come back later. And
How much is it?
$120,000.
$120,000 is the grant.
Okay. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.